Test mic, test mic. Okay, Scott, just say a couple words here.
Hey, how are you doing? Do I
Scott,
sound
can you
good if I
say a
hit
couple
this?
words to test the mic?
Yep. How are you doing? If I hit this, can you hear it? Let's just go be 100% sure we're coming in the right.
Anything?
No, that is working.
Okay, I hear you now. Go ahead.
Okay, great. Yeah, we're all good on my end. Unless I'm too low. It looks a
Nope.
little low. I'll just adjust that a little bit. Input. All right.
Loud and clear, man. All
All
right.
right.
Okay, in
I'm hearing a feedback on your end.
like an echo sound?
I hear myself coming back to me,
Interesting. Okay.
like a little delay.
Let me try something. Maybe.
If you're not picking it up, then
I'm not. I'm not at all.
okay.
If you put maybe if
Weird.
you put headphones in, it will.
No, no, I'm doing headphones.
Oh, you're doing headphones. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Weird. All
Is
right.
it annoying?
Well, no, that's fine.
Okay, cool. All right. In three, two, one. Could you imagine climbing Mount Kilimanjaro in record time with no training? How about spending 5 hours in a 180-degree sauna? Most people think these are nearly impossible feats, but our guest today has done them both. Today on the podcast, we are welcoming back for the second time superhuman performance hacker, investigative journalist, and anthropologist Scott Carney. He's the
You
author of
make
new.
me sound much cooler than I actually am, man.
That's
I
my
gotta
goal. That
say.
is the goal of the interviewer. Scott is the author of numerous books, including the New York Times bestseller "What Doesn't Kill Us," that talks about his experience studying with Wim Hof, who holds 28 world records for various superhuman acts. From this experience, Scott learned how to hack his body, train his mind to train his mind to climb Mount Kilimanjaro in record time with no training and just wearing shorts. Scott also spent 5 hours in a sauna that would kill most humans. He has a new book out titled The Wedge. In Scott's new book, he addresses how people can wedge control over their automatic physiological responses and control their bodies and minds to perform superhuman tasks. Scott has worked in some of the most dangerous and unlikely corners of the world as an investigative journalist. He has writings that have appeared in Wired, Men's Journal, Playboy, and Fast Company. He has been the subject of many TV programs, including NPR and National Geographic TV. Scott won the Payne Award for ethics for his story, which tracked an international kidnapping-to-adoption ring, and he is with us on the podcast today. Scott, I have to say you're getting really close if you're not qualified to be Dos Equis' most interesting man in the world with all of the things that you've
That'd
done
be
so far,
awesome. Can you
right?
imagine the pivot? I've been an investigative journalist for like 15, 20 years. And then I pivot into like a model for a beer company. I would freaking love that. That would be the best. That would be the most interesting thing to do,
I,
actually.
I, when I thought of that, when I was reading or creating your intro here, I was thinking we need a contest for, they have the most beautiful or handsome man or whatever woman. I was like, we need a contest for the most interesting man and woman in the world. And then I would put your name in on it. I would say
Oh,
Scott
cool. I mean,
Carney.
I think I would not get the first prize, but if I could just be on the honorable mentions,
Runner
I'd be
up.
very
I mean,
excited.
top 50. I mean, I would be
Yeah.
happy. Good, man. How are you doing?
I'm great. Yeah, things are. I've been in my house for a very long time, since
Mm-hmm.
April, more or less. I mean, in Denver anyway. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to getting on to new projects. That would be fun. But
Good.
my work, believe it or not, involves a lot of travel and going places and seeing things. And most of the countries I want to go to
Yeah.
do not let
And
me in.
and so yeah, and from a traveler myself, like I completely understand that. Like, have you traveled any since? So you guys that are listening, depending on whenever you listen, it's October 2020, so COVID's been around for a while. Not a lot of people are traveling. Have you been traveling much, Scott?
You're talking into the future and you're assuming COVID's over. I mean, it could be that you're talking, and these were the good old days, believe it or not. So, hello,
Yeah.
future self.
Well, let's just hope these aren't the good old days. Let's just hope these are the bad old days, or the hard times, not the golden years, the hard times. But have you been traveling at all? Like, or you just been staying put?
I mean, I did go to visit my wife's family up in Idaho briefly, and then I'm going to go on a road trip like in 2 days. I'm going to go to Santa Fe and
Oh, cool.
Telluride, and
Oh
goodness,
man,
it's gonna be fun. I mean, that's just like within 6 or 7 hours of my house. So
yeah.
we'll see. It'll be interesting. I wonder if what it'll be like out there in the other parts of the world.
Well, I've done a couple road trips. Like, just wear your mask and
Yeah.
enjoy the road trip. That's all it is. It's just like at home, but you're on the road. Stopping at gas stations and you but Telluride is one of my favorite cities on earth. So enjoy it.
Hmm.
You've been before?
I have never been actually.
Oh,
I've heard nothing but great things about it.
yes, enjoy it, man. Enjoy it. So we had you on the show. I think it's probably almost 2 years ago. It was episode 409, and now we're at episode 480 or something like that. Talking about ice baths, you climbing Kilimanjaro with Wim Hof, and biohacking and all the cool things. But it seems like you've just continued the pace over the past couple years. You now have a new book, The Wedge, out, and a newer book, and it came out in April. Is that right?
Yeah, yeah. The 2 day, like a week after the whole country got into lockdown.
Great timing. Great timing.
Yeah, right.
As that actually that may help sales. I don't know. Do you think that has helped sales or hurt sales, or
Oh
what do you
no,
think?
it's been catastrophic for sales. I mean, it was it
Yeah.
was it was like, I had a lot of media coverage because I had done a whole media plan up to that point. So they sort of like, wrote a little. I got in a lot of places, but everyone was concerned about the lockdown. And my book is a lot about going out into the world and doing things, right? And and it's like, go out and you sort of like meet people and face dangers and stuff like that. And like the dangers now are so existential
Yeah.
that that the book I needed to write was sit at home and meditate, do everything at home,
Yeah.
and so that is it's it is what it is. There is certainly the book is getting an audience, and people are talking about it, but it did not do what doesn't kill us did out of the gate.
Well, maybe this is like a good time to talk about like how you can optimize your life at home,
Hmm.
because what I've found through Corona is that if we don't like or love our living spaces, it's going to greatly affect us when we are on lockdown, but it also really affects us when we're not on lockdown. We
Hmm.
may not know it because we may just be at home, to sleep or to eat dinner and sleep, and then we're gone for the rest of the day going about our lives.
Hmm.
So one of the things we've been doing, we were just talking before the show, we built an MMA gym in our garage, and we have an ice bath, an
Nice.
ice cold plunge in the backyard, and a slack line in the yard as well. And we have a
Huh.
co-working space in our house too. So we've got like a place where a few of us can co-work, but also train, stay healthy.
Hmm.
We get stressed out, go take an ice bath, chill. The only thing I don't have that I almost got, but I didn't buy it for whatever reason, was a sauna. But I know you have a
Hmm.
sauna in your house now.
I do.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And so, what are how do you optimize your living space? Has it changed since Corona hit, or did you have it down pretty well before COVID?
So yeah, I work from home, and I have worked from home for the last 20 years. So
Mhm.
nothing substantial has changed in my sort of day to day, right? Because my
Okay.
commute is from my bedroom to my office. That's 15 feet. My coworker is my wife. We don't wear masks. And I've got a nice yard. I've got two cats, and the things that have not, and I love my house. My house is like ideal. Like it's not too big, not too small, it's just right. And I have a sauna, which I was not using in the summer because it was 100 degrees here, and who wants to go in a sauna when it's already a sauna
Right.
outside? But just getting cold now, so we're starting to get into it again, which is fantastic.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's funny. I don't really believe in the idea of optimization, right? And this is a
Okay.
thing that the biohacking community loves. It's like if
Right.
you look at all your markers and your data of your life, right? If you could just do X, Y, and Z, you're going to get 10% more
Yeah.
efficient or happy or something like that. To me, that's all great, whatever, go for it. But
Hmm.
I like, how do you feel is the question. Like the entrance point is not make 6 changes to your diet and then you're be super awesome in every way. It's just like, do the things you like, make small incremental progress every day, no matter how small it is, but a little bit. So you're working towards a goal, and then just enjoy yourself. Like if you do that, you are optimized, because there's no like, the way I start most of my books, actually, in one way or another, saying you're going to die one day, right? We all, this is the truth. It's coming right up around the corner, and we're all going to get there. And when you realize this, that everything you feel revolves around death, and so we all also psychologically know that death is coming, what you do with your life in the time that you have is important. And your choices are important, but that does not necessarily mean you have to have the most efficient life possible, so that when you're on your deathbed, you're like, I used all of my time perfectly. Right. It just means you are living your life the way you want to right now, and where you get to is where you get to at the end of the day. And I believe that we should be making progress. We should be taking risks, but there's no one right path on how to do it, right? And certainly not someone else telling you, this is what you must do. Like, I'm a big Wim Hof guy. I love the breath work. I love the sauna. I love throwing the kettlebells. I do all of this stuff, and that's been my path, and I love it. I would never tell you that you have to do this, right? If you did these 10 things, you would be perfect. You would be superhuman. Like, no, that's fucking bullshit. Like if your life path is sit on your couch and eat Cheetos and really get good at Netflix, who am I to tell you that that's not the right way to do it? I mean, it's not my choices. They're your choices.
Yeah. And we shouldn't judge like where creative genius comes from, because sometimes people sitting on a couch eating Cheetos can come up with the most creative things that change the world, right?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I found Wim Hof initially, and this was back in, Wim Hof's like the famous ice bath guru, right? I was the first journalist to really write about him and take him seriously, for instance, and this was back in 2011. But I found him on Reddit. Like he did like an AMA or something. That's where I found him. Like I was just on the internet like anyone else.
Were you eating Cheetos on your couch?
No, but my diet was not great back then. But yeah.
Yeah, that's excellent, man. Well, maybe let's talk a bit about that. So how do you keep that part of your life in check? Like I know you pursue your passions, like you like ice baths, you like saunas, obviously, but you like writing, like you like diving into these stories and understand all these different, you've written about false gurus, you've written about getting sucked into the enlightenment traps, you've written about, kidnapping rings around the world, all these really wild things. Other than like on a day-to-day life, if you ever get off track, like, do you ever get off track? And then if you do, how do you get yourself back in balance?
Oh yeah, I generally think of my life as off track. Weirdly, like my procrastination abilities are far more honed than my optimization ability.
I like this. Okay.
I can sit around and waste 8 hours in the day, no trouble. But I do have like, there's this idea between tactics and strategy when you think about military stuff, right? Tactics are the soldiers on the ground and their actual movements engaging the enemy. And then there's strategy, which is like, we must move the armies from France to Germany. That like these are sort of big movements. The way I look at my life is like, I'm really good at strategy and I am shitty at tactics. Okay. Right? So I can be like, look, I want to get a book done by next December, right? This is my goal. Next December, I want a book done. And so what do I need to do to get that? And I sort of plan that out. You need to have a chapter done by next month. And then another, there's 12 chapters in the book. A chapter a month would work. You sort of like figure out what that long-term, over the course of 1 to 5 years, like you make a plan. You say, I'm going to get it done by the end of 5 years. And so then if I just do a little bit every day, like a book is 80,000 to 100,000 words, right? So you do the math on that and you write 500 words a day during weekdays and you have a book done in like 8 months and you can still take vacation. So go for it. Like it's really not that hard to plan and do big things if you break it up into really small chunks. So then, you do your 500 words a day, and there's some more structure to this, obviously, but once you've accomplished something, you can just jack off the rest of the day. That should be fine. And
Uh-huh.
and then it turns out that I have like a whole shelf full of books that I've written, because I'm 42 years old now, and I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 or 6 books that I've written.
Uh-huh.
It's people think that, 5 or 6 books, that's a lot, but if you're writing them once every like couple of years, it just sort of adds up.
Right. Right.
So this is sort of my life advice is have big plans, try to think strategically what your long term, what do you want to be. Like if you could answer that question and then you say I need a goal to get there, then you don't need to do any extra work other than the stuff that you need to do to get to that goal.
I'm always curious because, like, we study a lot and talk a lot to people that are successful and talk about their success tactics and how they stay on top of things. But like, when your day is shit, like when your day is, you just don't feel like doing anything,
Mm-hmm.
and you feel off. You don't feel like riding. You don't feel like bathing. You don't feel like any of that. What do you do? Like, how is there? Do you have anything that you use? Like for me, exercise or
Sure.
going to
Mm-hmm.
visit with friends or something, like helps get me back into a better state of mind. Anything that you use
You
to
got
help?
to break your routines, right? So if you're in a rut, you have to go find a way to get out of that rut. Because if you're in the sort of a self-reinforcing pattern of any
Mhm.
sort, that you get really good at that pattern, and it can be difficult to emotionally or physically leave it. So having various sorts of variation in your day that hit your sort of nervous system different ways. So like a cold shower is great because it's
Mhm.
hard. You don't want to do it. No one ever wants to do a cold shower, right? But then it's a huge variation in what your nervous system is feeling.
Yeah.
So that automatically gets you like it's telling your body a different language. And okay, I'm gonna go change. I do. Um, when I try to do stuff with friends, sometimes I'll do this kettlebell passing, which I write about in the Wedge. But I also have
Mhm.
a very sort of established cycling habit. I've gone about 2,300 miles this year on my bike, and
Nice.
I'm hoping to get 25 or maybe 3,000 depending on the weather.
Mhm.
And so I have things that I will go back to that are physical, and that sort of break your mind. So if you're sitting in front of your computer, that's like one sort of like downtime. Your nervous system is in a parasympathetic state, which means like the opposite of fight or flight.
Right.
And then when you do exercise, you put yourself more into that fight or flight mode. And so that's binary. Um, uh, those are like polar opposites of your nervous system. Your nervous system only has 2 ports it can go to, which is fight or flight or rest and digest.
Right.
And if you can toggle between those, you're going to get out of your rut.
Yeah.
Because the ruts really are sticking in one place. And the other rut is of course anxiety, which is where you're always in fight or flight. It doesn't matter
Mhm.
what you're doing, you're always like sort of freaked out because like COVID's going to come and get you. So you need to like turn off the COVID knob for a little bit and think about some other stuff for a while. There's lots of little of tricks that I talk about in my book to create variation, and it's like emotional and physical variation, which are important. That said, I've been in ruts before. Like sometimes you have a bad day. Like I never beat myself up over if I had like my last 3 days, I was like a lump of meat that was doing nothing interesting. On the fourth day, I don't say, well, I don't get depressed over that. I say, okay, well, I can do something else if I want to. And
Right.
and I think that's really important, is not to be judgmental of yourself, because we're all sort of broken humans, right? We're all like none of us are perfect, and there's no even desire from me to want to be perfect.
Yeah, I like that. I like how you say it, like we are all broken humans in one way or another. But that's kind of really the premise of the book, right? To change your state of mind, to change your physiological physiological excuse me,
Physiological.
that word reaction, in order to get into a different state.
Right.
And you talk about the multiple different ways that you can do that through the book, but also how it operates our brain states and how it affects
Mm-hmm.
our bodies. And one thing that I found interesting and I'd like to learn more about is, I think you went to Stanford to the neuroscience laboratory to learn more about flow states and how to keep focus during that time. Can you share a bit about that?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, so I went to Andrew Huberman's lab, who's recently gotten very famous because he was on Joe Rogan and,
Yeah.
all sorts of like big name stuff. So I met him probably 3 or 4 years ago originally, and I've hung out with him a few times at Stanford. What he was doing at that time was putting people into a virtual reality simulator where
Okay.
there were sharks swimming around them, and
Okay.
the idea, and then he would measure their autonomic arousal, so the parts of your body that are not conscious, how alert they are essentially. And he was sort of looking at that, and this goes back to that sympathetic, parasympathetic, fight or flight, rest and digest stuff that I was talking about.
Right.
And so the people he put in the virtual Shark Tank were people who were sensitive, like who were anxious people, right? Because when I got there, I swam with the virtual sharks, and I was like, whatever, like, because I'm not a particularly anxious person, and a
Right.
movie of a shark does not like trigger me.
Yeah.
Maybe if it was Stephen King's It, I would get really freaked out. But virtual sharks, not so much. But for somebody who is like a sharkophobe, right, and you put them in a shark tank, that's enough to trigger anxiety responses. So what he was doing is putting them in this contraption where you're in sort of a VR world where it sort of looks like the real thing, sort of sounds like reality, but it's not. You're actually in a safe spot. So he's putting you in a contrasting location where there's the thing that makes you anxious, but you also know in your mind that you're safe.
Right.
So it's this contrast between this thing that triggers you and you being like, no, I am okay. And he was using this. He was studying their responses, but psychologists can then use this as a treatment, right? As exposure therapy. You're afraid of sharks, we'll show you some virtual sharks, and you'll slowly get desensitized to your shark fear, and you'll be less anxious. And truly interesting. And one of the things that I learned with Huberman is that sensation, the things you feel physically, whether it's hot or cold or ticklish, or like any sensation that you feel, equals, as in is, emotion. Okay. And this is something I never really thought about, but even in when we speak in English, we say, oh, I'm feeling sad today, I'm feeling happy today, right? That word feeling is also a physical sensation that we have, right? When you're feeling sad, it's not only a mental construct, my mom said something mean to me, now I'm sad. It's actually like, sometimes I imagine sadness as like if my brain were a bar, someone was bending it, right? So this is and it was like the feeling that a bar would have when it bent. I don't know why that's in my head, but that's how I feel at sadness, how I would describe it. But whatever it is, it's sort of ineffable. It sort of defies words, but it is a sensation. Right. And when you start thinking about things like fear, right? You have a sense, when we think about cold, for instance, like we go back to the ice bath, you jump in the ice bath and it sucks at first. You hate it, right? It is the worst emotion. It's like horror and abject, life or death is going on in there. But then you train yourself to say, no, I can deal with the ice bath. It may sort of suck a little bit, but I can get through it. And then eventually you realize that, no, it's actually sort of fun. It's actually sort of interesting. It's like a challenge I'm overcoming. It's actually, and you're changing the emotional valence of that sensation. And that's fascinating, because now you've sort of transformed what the ice bath is emotionally, but it also changes your physiology, as we talked about in your previous our previous conversation, right? How when you jump into the ice bath, your physiology changes, but your emotional state also changes. Now, if we take this over into fear, anxiety, or whatever, you can do a similar thing where you change the valence of that emotion, or the thing that triggers the emotion, so that it becomes something which is not so bad. And it's not the same as saying, buck up, get over it, and grit your way through it. That's not what I'm saying. It's not like you ignore your emotions, but you can actually alter the way that we encounter and react to emotions. Right. To get into all the biology is a little bit difficult, but essentially, if you're able to know, if you're in an emotional state that's giving you you have a sensation that's coming in, it triggers an emotion, and so those things become equated. But if you're able to find the same emotion right? Let's say it's happiness, and you're happy in a sauna, in a like 130-degree sauna. That let's say that's happy for you, right? If you find and let's say a bad state would be a difficult conversation with your wife, for instance, right?
Yeah.
Well, what if you had that difficult conversation with your wife in a sauna, right? That might create a different set of emotional valences because you have a different underpinning now, and that you're combining sensations and emotions in sort of novel ways. Now, that sort of concept we apply to everything, right? You know, we that sort of concept we can apply to anything you feel. You realize that there's environmental signals that are coming in that you can try to start tweaking, and that alters your consciousness, and also you alter your consciousness to change the way you feel in the physical world. It's like sort of a two-way street because there's that equal sign.
Right. So do you, like, if you notice that you're having I guess you can say, like, a negative reaction to a situation, what's your process of either recognizing that or starting to work on that to make that reaction either diminish so you have more control over it and then have a better result?
Well, there's tons of ways to do it, but let's say I'm in a bad mental state, right? There's a bad feeling in my body, right? Your brain can only pay attention to so many feelings at once for a number of like limited brain resource reasons. And if you know you're in a funk, and that funk is a sensation, you can apply a different sensation to your body where your brain has to pay attention to this other sensation, which then alleviates the funk. And this, you know, people have been talking about this in various ways for eons, but one of the basic ways is go exercise, right? Because the exercise is a set of physical sensations, and you're sort of overriding it for a little bit, right? And hopefully while you're doing that, you're thinking about something else, right? Or you're thinking about something positive. You're thinking about that thing that was getting you down in the physically new positive light that you can. And so, which is not to say you avoid everything. Like you could actually use the wedge to become a really broken person if you wanted to. You know, you could use it to become like the very best anorexic you ever wanted to, which is not what I'm suggesting. But what you realize, it is a tool to create a different emotional valences to your sensations. So you say, look, I'm in a funk. I'm going to do something that I know makes me feel good. And I'm going to focus on those sensations, and then try to sort of think about this stuff that sucks in this different state. And oftentimes when you're in a funk, you're in a parasympathetic state, which means you're in your rest and digest state, which is supposed to be the positive state, right? The rest and digest, like in your bed, is supposed to be like the awesomest place your body can be. But now you've created sort of the anxiety coming from your brain, right? And you're now attaching anxiety to the awesome place.
Right.
And that's bad, because then that awesome place sort of like, because you're getting these sensations from this awesome place, you're inflecting that with your shitty mood. And so now you have to get into a different body state. So if you're in parasympathetic, go to sympathetic, right? And go fight or flight, and then try to get some emotional state changes. And then you'll find that unless you're truly, unless you have inscribed negative emotions to every physical place you could be, which I guess could happen, but that would take some work. You start to have the tools to dig yourself out of that hole.
Okay. So is this maybe why a lot of people, would this be a reason why some people have trouble sleeping? So they have negative fear states, maybe when they go to sleep, when they're going into bed where they're supposed to be in their happy place. And then throughout the night, they're just waking up and thinking about, maybe just like in a cycle of negative thoughts over and over.
Yeah, for sleep in particular, I think the best advice I ever had recently about having good sleep is don't bring your fucking phone into the bedroom.
Yeah.
This is 100%. This is the 100%. You're having trouble sleeping. If you were doing the phone in the bedroom thing, you are going to sleep badly, almost like by definition. And one of the reasons is because of actually my hanging out with Andrew Huberman, is that, and this is fascinating. So imagine our Paleolithic ancestors, right? We are on the plains of Africa, and there's a lion on the horizon. I like going back to this example a lot because, you know, none of us have actually seen our Paleolithic ancestors, but let's imagine what he was doing, right? See, he's on the plains of Africa, and there is a lion half a mile away, and he can see it because he's got really good vision. Okay. Now, when that lion is half a mile away, so the way light gets to you, right, is it sort of reflects off the animal and it goes to your eye, and your eye is focusing on that. So your lens in your eye adjusts to the wavelength of the light in order to put it in focus. Okay. And because it's at a long wavelength, because it's far away, your lens sort of moves. I guess it moves forward. I think it moves forward. And that tunes down your sympathetic response because it's so far away, and the threat of that lion, you can conceive of that lion ripping you apart, but it's not going to do it right now. Right? Now imagine that lion spots you and starts running at you. Now, regardless of what's going in your mind about that lion's going to rip me up. Okay. That's a different part of your brain, and that does all sorts of things too. It's running up to you, and your lens moves closer to the back of your eye, right? And as the lens moves, your sympathetic nervous system ramps up, because sympathetic, which is your fight or flight state, increases from physical distance. And so the lion gets up to you, and then you're fighting the lion, and you're in full fight or flight when you're there. And part of that's because you've conceived in your brain that the lion can hurt you, but also the movement of your eye also changes the way you get into the anxiety. So there's two systems going in and sort of attacking your brain. And weirdly, if you look at how the brain is structured, a lot of stuff comes up through the brainstem. Your nerves come up through the brainstem, but the eyes actually connect directly into the brain. So there's a different pathway involved there. So now imagine in the present day, we live in rooms, right? I'm in a room right now. My wall is 4 feet from me there, or maybe 4 feet from me there. Everything is in a sympathetic state, right? Slightly, just looking at my lamp, it's at a sympathetic state. Now think about you holding your phone 2 feet from your face. It doesn't matter what it says, but it's 2 feet from your face. Therefore, you are in a slightly sympathetic state just because of the distance from your eyes. And that is just the way we are wired. It is an evolutionary mismatch. And now imagine a politician says something stupid. I don't know why they would do that.
I couldn't imagine that happening at all. It's nonsense.
So a politician says something stupid, and he is triggered at the distance where that lion can actually swap you with its claws. And so just simply because of that, we actually get riled up more on our phones because of social media and because of everything, simply because of proximity. Because we didn't evolve with our phones. We didn't evolve getting the existential threats were always sort of remote things from us, right? Or they were right on top of you, like literally going to kill you. And now we've sort of mixed and matched that with the way our sort of culture and society have created. Now, in terms of sleep, if you're getting your threats right before you go to bed, you're going to be triggered in that autonomic fight or flight. And so you're going to try to sleep when you've just been dumping adrenaline into your body, even like imperceptibly small adrenaline, right? I mean, it's not like it's not like you pick this up and you're in full fight or flight, but it's just a little bit.
Some of those things on the internet, though, they can boost a lot of adrenaline.
Yeah, they can. And then you don't have, and oftentimes like the reason why you have adrenaline, right? The whole reason that's in your body is because you have a threat and you want to go deal with it. Like adrenaline decreases your pain threshold and gives you a little bit more energy, right? So you can go fight or flight, you can get the hell out of there. So in the old world, in this Paleolithic world, all of the problems were dealt with like you had an activity. The threat was coming and you stabbed the lion or you climbed up the tree. That's what you did. In our present day world, it's like this politician saying something dumb and they're going to blow up the planet. Like, and there's nothing you can do about that. Like you and I can't do crap about whichever side, left or right, you fall on, or middle or whatever. Honestly, other than voting, which you should vote, other than voting, you can't do it much in the world. And
Right.
unless you are a powerful politician or want to do something like crazy, like most of us are just sort of sitting here, and all we get is the anxiety. We don't get the physical outlet. We
Right.
can't stab. We shouldn't stab the person who's causing that problem. And so the internet creates a lot of like latent anxiety in all of us. This is why we're all angry right now, because we don't have physical outlets. This is why people, someone says something dumb on the internet, and like sort of the farther people out there say, I'm going to go beat you up, I'm going to go do something, because they're trying to think in their brains
Yeah.
that we need a physical outlet to this, right? I'm not going to just answer you with words, because words don't do anything, which honestly they don't on the internet. All they do is make other people mad.
Right. Right. And so essentially, like, that's kind of where the the mass trolling will come in, just from people that are looking at their phones from 2 feet away and their brain having that reaction to it, and
Mm-hmm.
then feeling like they have to do something, having to reply to whatever post is on social
Uh-huh.
media, or whatever video, and then reacting in that way. I have the rule now in my house, in my life, to turn the phone off 30 minutes before bed, and then keep it off until lunch the next day. And
Oh wow.
it's been one of the best things that I've ever done. And I absolutely love it. Now, last week was a really crappy week, and it was interesting because my screen time came up, and it said a little notification: your screen time on your phone was up 59% last week. And it made so much sense why I was feeling like crap on Thursday and Friday. I had
Mm-hmm.
really bad days. I couldn't figure what my funk was until I got that notification. I was like, I'm just spending way too much time on my phone. It's messing with
Mm-hmm.
my brain. Like
Yeah.
it's messing it up. So yeah, that's it's phenomenal. And I think, like, the more we study it, it's more, the more we get engaged with online stuff and the internet, the more we want to learn more and do more, and
Mm-hmm.
embrace it more. But also, the more we realize that it's throwing our brains out of whack, and we have
Yeah.
to get off them.
Yeah. Well, we need to do. I mean, I don't know. At the end of the day, have phones made our lives better or worse? I mean, probably a little bit
Better.
better.
Yeah.
But we do need to realize that we are also physical creatures. We don't just exist in the area of the mind. We have to do things. We have to be physical. And because if we don't, we get into these anxiety spirals. And this is why the wedge is really about contrast. It's about contrasting different physical states. I'm not saying throw out your phone. I'm not saying just go live in an ice bath either. Like I'm saying, like you need to read your phone in the ice bath. That's what I'm saying. Okay, I'm
Uh,
saying. I wonder what that would do to a person.
right.
I'm saying that you need to move between a variety of different sensorial states,
Yeah.
and none of that, nothing is implicitly wrong, right? There's no implicitly wrong state as far as I'm aware, but it is generally not a good idea to just stick in one of them,
Yeah.
right? And it's funny because if you look on my it was a lot of people think I'm like the most extreme superhuman ever. Scott's always in his underwear on mountaintops, right? There's a
You're
group of
close,
people
man.
who, but it's not true. Like the truth is that I do that stuff, but I also do the Netflix and Cheetos. Like I can be on both
Uh-huh.
spectrums, and that's okay, because it's not about, because the people who are really hard chargers, they're like every minute I must get it. I must be on top of the mountain all the time. Those people are crazy, right?
Yeah.
Those people are like they're trying to fix a different side of their emotions, because they can't rest. They
Yeah.
can't sit in that downtime, because whatever they haven't dealt with is they're just as psycho. Actually, they're just as psycho as the people are on just doing Cheetos. And so I'm a person who really thinks that you need to have multiple states. You have to have moderation,
Yeah.
but also you need to have extremes.
Absolutely. So, speaking of extremes, I've got to ask you about the 5 hours in the sauna, man. So, last time
Mhm.
you were on the podcast, I think you were getting a sauna installed, or it was going to be installed after the show or something like that. And and then uh, and then I saw, like, I follow your stuff, but I don't follow it every single day. And then I just saw all of a sudden it's, hey, Scott was in the sauna for 5 hours. I understand, because I've read What Doesn't Kill Us, and I've done a lot of cold cold extreme ice baths myself, but I haven't seen the heat intensity side of things. I know Wim Hof ran through the
Mhm.
desert, but dude, 5 hours and 180 degrees. What, how, and why?
Mhm. So this was, I went to something called a traditional Latvian Pirts, which is just the
Okay.
word for sauna in Latvian,
Okay.
where I went there with my wife, and we sort of drove out into the sort of pretty rural countryside, sort of secluded grove. And we were met by two Pirtniks, which means the person who owns the sauna, but it also could be translated, if you wanted to, a shaman. Okay.
Okay.
Where we have these people who are trained in sort of like traditional medicine. I mean, if you're in Latvia and you ask someone what their religion is, like 9 times out of 10, they're going to tell you they're pagan, which I think
Uh-huh.
is crazy and
It's,
awesome.
it's cool.
You're like, you're a pagan? You're like, yeah, we're pagan. So it's
We didn't know
basically,
you still existed. Wow.
so that, and like they spend time like foraging for mushrooms and stuff. I mean, they're interesting folk, the
Uh-huh.
Latvians. Um, and essentially these people look like garden gnomes. They have like little pointy hats. They're made of felt, and so
Not everybody from Latvia, just the
just the
Pyrenees.
Pyrenees. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Actually, it would be funny if it was everyone. So let's just have everyone in Latvia wears pointy hats. Okay.
Okay.
No, so these Pyrenees are there, and they it's a ritual. It's like a 5 or 6 hour ritual, and it starts with uh, a weird ass tea ceremony where
Okay.
you drink tea that's made from like the local environment. So I believe the tea was made out of wormwood, which is
Okay.
like sort of very bitter yellow tea. It was just oddly familiar, but it's sort of like, pine needly bitter, like licking a dandelion sort of thing.
Okay.
Um, there's bread with honey in it and like pine needles in it. So it's sort of this weird contrast between what you're familiar with and not familiar with, but you're sort of mixing it all in one thing. So that we have a weird meal, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And then they begin. They do this next part of the ceremony where the Pirtniks tell us my wife and I, to close our eyes, and they create this sort of like weird sound symphony around us, where they take like they literally are like dancing around us while our eyes are closed, and they're
Okay.
like using like rain sticks to make the sounds of rain, like beating branches to make it sound like a storm. And at one point they have like a little music box where there's Furelise playing on the music box. I mean, it's
Okay.
just like a cacophony of weirdness. Okay.
Okay.
And
Okay.
we're sitting there, we're like, what the fuck are we doing? Because I'm not that sort of sage burning, sort of hippie dude. Like,
Uh-huh.
that's not really my thing. So my wife and I are both like oddly uncomfortable and sort of funny and whatever. And this dance sort of happens. And what I didn't notice, because we're in the tea room next to the sauna, it's just sort of a small space entirely, that as they're doing this, they had opened up the door to the sauna, which was at probably 300 degrees. They'd like really brought up the heat in there, and that heat wafted into our room.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't notice until I opened my eyes, and that the temperature was ridiculously hot, because I
Oh,
was
wow.
so confused by the weird ass dance that they're doing
Okay.
around me. And then both Laura and I look at each other, and Laura's my wife, and we both start sweating right then, but we
Okay.
weren't before this happened, right? And so this sort of misdirection ends up being a really important part of the sauna experience. So then we go into the sauna, and Laura and I, we get naked, and I'm an American, so it feels a little weird being naked in front of strangers.
Mm-hmm.
And then we lie down on these benches, and it's like 180 degrees in the sauna, and it gets hotter and hotter. And as we talk about, as you're sitting there, and they're doing things like rubbing honey on you and hitting you with branches of spruce. And the branches of spruce, incidentally, I realized, were the things that we were eating in the other room. Okay.
Okay.
So they're sort of like mix, and like beating us with wormwood and bouquets of flowers, all sorts of weird shit.
Uh-huh.
But they're mixing the sensory stuff that they had in that original weird ass tea ceremony.
Okay.
And again, the temperature gets really high, and you start sort of paying attention to the shit they're doing and not the temperature.
Okay.
And as your body gets to the point where you're like at that red line, like, oh my God, I can't take it anymore, they'll like dip some flowers into like a bucket of water and put the water on your head, and then bring you just down below that sensory red line. And they did this and then after like 45 minutes or an hour, then you jump into like cold water for 2 minutes, and then you'd come back into the sauna. So,
Okay.
and you're doing all of these things. And what's fascinating about my sensory system at this time is as they're beating me with a piece of wormwood, right? Okay, so they're hitting me, and I start experiencing the hitting as sound. Okay. I start experiencing it as smell, and I get this essentially synesthesia that occurs in this, where my senses are so weirded out and confused by all of this mixing and matching of stuff that I start experiencing in different brain pathways. And I'd never experienced synesthesia before, but like when you see the sound of wormwood, it's weird, right? Your brain is like just confused, and it's also because your body's under stress at a very high temperature, right? And you're going through these contrasts where there's like you're getting, it's too hot, it's too hot, and then you're like a little bit of water, and then you're okay, now I can take it for another 5 minutes, and yeah, you have 5 hours of this crap, and I felt like new at the end of it. Like I felt like I'd been through something, my wife had been through something, we'd been through something together, and like my senses were like all cleaned out because they'd never, I'd never heard something with my eyeballs before. That was sort of cool. So, and I felt like really rejuvenated, and that's essentially how I got through that 5 hours of sauna. And instead of just being a weird experience, like the question is, well, what was the point? Like, was it just a weird thing to do? Well, it's really interesting that just about every indigenous system of medicine around the world, around the circumpolar world, so an area that gets cold, has a sauna tradition of some site. And it's about putting contrast into people's experiences so that their bodies get better. And what you find is that the indigenous people, all the Lakota sweat lodge, the saunas in Finland and in Russia and where else, all of this is like a way of community coming together and actually alleviating depression, alleviating the down states that come from being in sort of the dark winter months where you're sort of going in parasympathetic, trying to get essentially hibernate. This is trying to like wake you up again. And there's some really fascinating research by this guy named Chuck Raison at University of Wisconsin-Madison, who shows that if you put people into a sauna for just a few hours, you have a remarkably similar effect to somebody being on an SSRI, which is the like Prozac or an antidepressant for 3 weeks. And and even just one sauna gives you enough contrast to really alleviate symptoms of depression. So yeah, that's why we did it.
But it's like a longer sauna. Is it a longer sauna, or can you do a 15-minute sauna and still get the similar effects?
Did 40. I think that study was 45 minutes at 120.
Okay.
So sort of longer, but not crazy hot is what he did. But I think I found that when I do saunas, I do them at about 200 now, because I have the sauna, but I'd only do about 15 or 20 minutes at that temperature. I mean, you sort of vary, and ideally the best way to do a sauna is really hot and then roll around in snow. All right, really hot going to cold, because we're doing because in the sauna, the environment is telling you, calm the fuck down, right? Slow down. Right. And then you jump into the ice. It's like speed the fuck up, right? So we're getting that contrast there, and yeah.
Do you think would the average individual is this something that they could do? Or I know you guys practice Wim Hof breathing, and you've done a lot of extreme other things. Do you need to set yourself up and train before you go into a sauna for 5 hours with these guys, or is it something that anybody can do?
I had no sauna training before I did this. So I would not suggest you just go jump into a sauna without someone watching you. Like it was, I had to trust these people. I don't know why I did, because they were just garden gnomes. But
and pagan too.
Yeah. But you have to sort of be with somebody who's watching you, because it can be very dangerous, right? The people absolutely have died in saunas. It happened in Arizona not so long ago, right? There was these like 5 people who died in a sweat lodge at some sort of like men's retreat or something like that. Yeah. James Arthur Ray, that was the guy who did it. Yeah. So, I mean, this shit can be dangerous. And I think that cold is much safer than heat in general, because, you jump in an ice bath, you can jump out and then you'll warm up. it's harder to cool yourself down once your internal temperature is really high. So yeah, more dangerous, but not like crazy dangerous. Like I think that hot yoga actually does the same principles as well.
Absolutely.
Like if you're in a really hot yoga studio, what you're doing is the normal yoga, which is like sort of parasympathetic. I mean, you do work in it, but then you're mixing that with the heat, and so it sort of intensifies the activity that you're in. And that is, when you exercise in heat, you get more heat adaptation. It's similar concept to the ice bath.
So I just booked a 7-day darkroom retreat down in Mexico that I'm going to go do next month. And
what does that mean?
You sit in a dark room, pitch black for 7 days. Yeah.
Are you eating?
Yes, they serve food through a little hole with a curtain over it so light doesn't come in, or you can fast, choose to do fast. So like, I think I'll do a few days of coconut water fast on the last few days, and then the first few days eat for a few of them. So I was curious, like, applying some of these principles from the Wedge and what you use, how, because 7 days in the dark, I've never done anything like that. I've done a Vipassana meditation, which is 7 days, but not in a complete darkness. So
what's the sort of the mental, how do they check up on you to be sure you're not going crazy?
Well, you always have access to leave, they don't lock you in there. And you can, they give you a pen and a piece of paper, even though it's complete darkness. So you can write something on a note and say, hey, something's, bad or anything, and knowing that you're taking the food, obviously means that the food is no longer in the little cubby hole that they send it through. But also something that not a lot of people have done, but something that I found incredibly called to do when I first heard about it. And I thought, hey, this seems like a new, very interesting thing. So
yeah.
But apparently, like, what it's doing is because it's affecting your brain, your sleep patterns, melatonin levels, and also releasing some natural DMT inside of your brain, similar to kind of what Wim Hof breathing does, to visualize and deepen your meditation.
Sounds fascinating. I'd love to hear how that goes.
I will. I'll let you know, man. We're going to do a podcast and a YouTube video about it. I've got a friend of mine that's a YouTuber, and he's going to take.
Is it just going to be like a black screen with no sound? That'd be awesome.
This is what we do. Keep listening. Wait for it. Wait till the end. Yeah. So yeah, I'm excited. So. But I'll definitely take some of those tips that I've learned from you and over the years, talking about how you master hard and difficult tasks. And
I think the breath work would be interesting. I think if you do sort of the DMT breathing that I write about in the Wedge, so there's a particular type of Wim Hof breathing that releases more DMT than the other one. So I write about that in the Wedge. I think that I did it while I was doing ayahuasca and had a very interesting experience off of it.
I could imagine. Yeah.
And, you've got 7 days. So
what else am I going to do? No, actually the guy was he was telling me, if you're going to do any breathing techniques or anything, please do it while you're on the floor, because one of the girls came, she did some Wim Hof breathing while she was on a chair. She passed out and she knocked her head. 3 days later, she came up, she had a big old scar and a big knot on her head. And she's like, it's not your fault. I just did Wim Hof and passed out in the darkness while I was on this chair. I'll definitely be doing that as well. See what.
Always do Wim Hof lying down. I mean, always.
Yeah. Well, you don't do maybe on the floor in a lotus position ever? You're always lying down?
100% lying down. Yeah, I mean, because the passing out's a real risk. Yeah. And I think I go deeper when I'm lying down. I mean, I think when I first started, I did, maybe a year I was doing sitting up, and I just have better experiences lying down.
I think for me, I can breathe deeper lying down, because maybe because the body's expanded and not crunched over so much. So cool.
Sure.
Okay, man. Well, let's wrap things up. You've got a new book coming out. You got a couple podcasts. You've got the Wild Thing podcast and Syndicate podcast. Do you want to talk about those real quick before we close?
Sure. Yeah. So I run a small media company that does, it put out the Wedge. It's called Foxtopus Inc. And we also have podcasts if you are into the audio thing. There's also audio books. But one of the podcasts is called Wild Thing, which is put out by my wife, who I mentioned. We were naked in the sauna together. She's a former NPR reporter who is, or sort of for NPR editor for 10 years. And she found out that her long lost cousin was the preeminent academic expert on Bigfoot. And,
yes.
and he was, a tenured professor at Washington State University. And he had died before Laura got to meet him. But she was like, well, how could this guy spend like his whole life looking for Bigfoot and yet also be taken seriously by academics? So then she spent a year looking for Bigfoot. And like the answer, she finds some interesting things, but the question is like, why? What's the fascination with this sort of absurd topic? But what's the science behind it? And so that season has been out for 2 years. We just put out another season about the search for extraterrestrial life, where she's going from everywhere from Roswell to SETI, right? From NASA to the fighter pilots who are seeing these strange objects out of their airplane windows. And it's a fascinating romp called Wild Thing.
Wild Thing. Okay. And Syndicate is the other one, correct?
Yeah, the Syndicate is also ours, and it's about the largest marijuana bust in Colorado history. Where these people were growing just immense quantities, like warehouses full of pot, because pot's legal in Denver and Colorado, but they weren't selling it in Denver, because one of the things that's crazy about pot is that while you can buy a pound in Denver for, I think it's $2,000, if you just trot that over to Minnesota, you can get $5,000 for it. So they found this out, this great arbitrage scenario, and it's like a 5-year run about the sort of the rise and then catastrophic fall of this weed smuggling organization. So that's like sort of true crime, fascinating story. Nice. With there's like skydiving planes involved with it, and there's some coked out drug running stuff. You'll enjoy it. Syndicate.
Most interesting man in the world, most interesting couple in the world, right there. You guys got that going on. Okay, so if anybody wants to learn more about Scott, check out The Wedge, the book, or scottcarney.com. You can find all the details there, and his podcast. Any final words before we sign off, Scott?
No, thanks so much for having me on. And, scottcarney.com. The company is called Foxtopus Inc. It's a fox and octopus mated and squirted out some ink. I
love it. Cool. Well, thanks so much for coming on the show. Congratulations on all your success over the past few years,
Thank you.
Man. I'm thoroughly impressed in what you're doing, and going to continue to follow you on your journey over the years too. Maybe if we're lucky, we'll get you on the show a few years down the road, whenever you do your next crazy thing. So
sounds good. See you at episode 583.
583. That'll be it. Listeners, thank you guys for tuning in once again, and we'll see you on the next episode. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye, guys. Cool, man. Thanks so much.
Done and done. Did that stop? Yeah, cool. All right, buddy.
All right.
We'll be out in a couple weeks.
Just send it to me.
Oh, hang on. It did this thing again. It's really interesting. Speaker. Okay. What'd you say, Scott?
No, great. I will. I'll do the social media dance.